Hello and welcome to another episode of Bare Bones Wargaming, a show with no bells, no whistles, no frills, just a man, a camera, and his game. Okay, now, where to begin? Well, let's begin at the beginning. This video is going to talk about Ostkrieg, World War II on the Eastern Front, newly released from Compass Games, designed by Mitchell Ledford and Greg Smith. Now, I did say before that I was planning on doing a playthrough sometime in the near future, and then I would probably do a review. Okay, here's the thing. I'm not going to do a playthrough because I just can't do it. I can't play this game again. I just can't. I guess the only way I can say it is I can't stomach it. I just can't. So I'm going to leap straight to the review. Now, of course, a little bit of a spoiler there. You probably have a good idea what kind of review this is going to be. I will get into more detail here as I go through the review, but that is why I'm not doing a playthrough, because I just can't bring myself to do it. Sorry. I apologize, but I just can't. So, you know what that means. You know what time it is. Boom, 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 boom. It's the BBW opinion time. Womp, womp, womp. Womp, womp, womp. Boom, boom, down, down. Hoo, ha, hoo, ha. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Alright. Another second spoiler alert. To quote Betty Davis in All About Eve, fasten your seatbelts, it's going to be a bumpy night. Okay. Let's begin with the good. Alright. First of all, good thing about this game, it does play very quickly. That is a huge positive. So if you make a mistake, somebody screws up, somebody misses something, you get a very horrible result, you can go ahead and quickly reset it. It is a strength point game. It doesn't take more than a few minutes to set up. It's easily rebootable. Okay, so that's good. The other good thing is I still am a fan of this build system. I think the build system is great. I think the idea of having your build points at the end of each year, and then having the cards with the cost, like this one is 1, this one is another one, and this one is 0. Let me find a better one, a better example here. But having different costs, you know, like, hang on, let me find one of the strong German cards, or even like this card here, the German Reserves, cost you 3 if you want to bring that one back in, you know, and if you want to go whole hog, you know, and start over again with the Major Blitz, it'll cost you 6, which is like half the German production points, but you can do it if you feeling lucky. Well, do I feel lucky? Well, do you, Panzers? So I do really like the build system. That was one thing I was a big fan of with Pacific Tide too. I think it's clever, I think it's interesting, and I think it's a lot of fun. And it is a good model from a strategic standpoint of, hey, you know, you're the government, you got these resources, how can you best spend them to maximize your effort? It's also very easy to learn. Take a matter of minutes to teach this to basically anybody. The combat system is basically a to-hit system. There's nothing fancy. You know, it's strength points, so there's no, you know, your triple numbers you usually see, attack, defense, movement. You don't have to worry about any of that. Cards is pretty straightforward. Hey, you use a card and you follow the directions in order on the card. You know, no problem there. The other thing I will say is that the rules this time, unlike Pacific Tide, the rules this time are actually quite clear. You know, it's like I showed you my unboxing video. You know, it's pretty clear. It's well laid out. I've only had a few questions, and I still only have a few lingering questions. But the rule organization, much better, much sharper, much crisper this time. So in some ways, it almost would behoove somebody to read these rules before they play Pacific Tide. Although, of course, Pacific Tide has some unique things because you don't have some of the elements, the naval, most notably, in Ostkrieg. So that's the good. Now on to the bad. Okay. Now, keep in mind that with this review, I am talking about this from a solitaire player's perspective. So, some of the things I'm going to say, and I'm going to mention what I think might be different if you were playing against another person. Some of those things that I'm going to say that are either bad or ugly probably would be impacted by that. But I have to talk about this the way I see it. And the way I see it is from a solitaire perspective. Because again, most of my gaming I do by myself. So having a good solitaire system or having a game that is easily adaptable to solitaire play is very, very important. Okay? Alright. Where to begin? Well, let's start with a couple of things on the bad ones here. First of all, this is an area movement game, and it is point to point, as I'm sure you can see here on the map. Okay? But one of the things that I don't agree with, and it's kind of bugging me, is the whole partisan thing. There's a partisan card. You can put down a partisan in any German-controlled or unoccupied area, like say Kiev here, and go ahead and put it there. And obviously, that's going to disrupt lines of communication, etc. Okay, all right, that's fine. But really, partisans? I mean, and again, this card comes in 42. Partisans really weren't a huge issue until 43. That's when things really started to get cranked up. Granted, 42 there was things going on, but 43 forward is when things really start to get cranked up. But even so, at this scale, this is supposed to be a strategic game. Partisans are going to have enough strength to basically disrupt the entire Kiev area. They're going to be that concentrated. That just doesn't seem right to me. Now, if the card was more along the lines of play it and, in a space where there's one or two German strength points, eliminate one of the points, that would make more sense to me. Because that would weaken the whole situation. That would potentially disrupt the supply lines, because then you could go ahead and plan a Soviet attack to hit that space, time it out right. Because, of course, in games that are card-driven, because, this really is a card-driven game, the timing, the organization of the play of your cards, the order, is very, very important. But at this level, it just doesn't seem right to say, okay, you know what, we're just going to have the partisans completely occupy a huge space like this and disrupt everything. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't fit, in my opinion. Another big thing that I think is bad here is the retreat rule. Now, in the game, with the retreat, if the attacker inflicts more damage on the defender, then the defending force has to retreat. So, of course, what that means is this. If you take a look here, and I'll zoom in. I'm pretty far into 1942 here, and this is my fourth and definitely final play, at least for the foreseeable future. But down here, you can see, actually, you know what, let me back up a little bit, because I want you to see, I'm going to mark them here. Up here is Leningrad, and here's Moscow. Okay. Now, both of those cities I was able to capture. Leningrad toward the end of 1941, Moscow early 1942, and part of it was because of this retreat rule. Okay. Now, granted, there is a card in the deck that does allow the Soviet player to play it in front of him, and you don't have to retreat from Leningrad. But there's only one for Leningrad. There is not one for Moscow, and that is a little baffling. Okay. And again, if the Soviets you're allowed to stack 12 land units in a space, plus 2 air units, and 12 can be any combination of armor and infantry, by the way. Then, even if the Germans only inflict 3 hits versus 2, and they're like, yeah, we want to move into Moscow to get a hold of the Kremlin, then they can do it. It's like, na 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 na, na 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 na. They have to leave. And to me, that just... I'm just going to say it. I'm just going to put it out there. And I'm very frustrated right now. That to me is just BSC. Which, the B is bat, the C is crazy, and I bet you all can guess the S. So, that just makes no sense to me. Okay, because if there was still enough strength of Russian troops there, I can't imagine that they would have left. I can't imagine Stalin would have allowed them to leave. You know, that was the whole point of the commissars and stuff. So I just can't wrap my head around it. I can't. I just can't do it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And again, why have a card in the game that allows you to do that with Leningrad, but not with Moscow? Moscow, the political rail hub that it was, and production center really, although a lot of that production, of course, was moved to the Urals. But that doesn't make any sense to me. The retreat rule is one of the things that's really bugged me since the very first time I played the game. Even when I read the rules, I went, huh. Okay, and on ties, it's even worse. If that was 2-2, the German wins ties. So the Russians would still have to retreat. Okay. Now, I know you're probably thinking, well, you know, the Russians could strategically retreat and then organize a counterattack. That's true. But again, the bot has a hard time doing that. And that is what I'm basing this on. As a two-player game, yes, you could argue that and say, you know what, hey, you could do a strategic withdrawal and stuff. But then there has to be some kind of consequences, right? Some kind of political, economic, military consequences for losing these major cities that held out for the entire war. You know, even Leningrad that was under siege for 900 days. It just doesn't add up for me. The retreat rule is just, yeah. Okay. Another thing is bad is the map. Okay? This map is, let me read the back of the box to get it right. 17 by 22. There are, on this map, there are a ton of spaces. The highest number is 130. The smallest, actually it starts at 1, way back here in the eastern part of the Soviet Union. So there are 130 spaces on this map. That makes things extremely crowded. That makes things extremely difficult when you're trying to pick up pieces and move things around and stuff. Quite frankly, I don't understand why this map couldn't have been bigger. You know, why not make it a little bit bigger and use 5/8 size counters? You're only using strength points, so you don't really have to worry about a whole lot of counter art and stuff. You know, it's not like we're making sure that we have every single Panzer Corps included. It doesn't make any sense to me. Now, the thing is that you could say, well, Pacific Tide, that wasn't a problem. You didn't mention that. Yeah, I know I didn't. Here's why. Check it out. There's the Pacific Tide map. Okay? Look at that. I counted. There's about 35 boxes, give or take a little bit. 35 spaces. So, of course, the 17 by 22 map is going to be okay. I mean, there's not too many. I mean, look how much room there is between each space. And compare that with this. I mean, just look at it. Seriously. I mean, I don't understand why the map couldn't have been bigger and the counters couldn't have been bigger. That, to me, just doesn't make any sense. It would have made play so much easier. It would have. So, other thing that's bad to me is the system itself. Now, the system, like I said, overall, I think the system's very clever with the cards and the build points and all that kind of stuff. But it feels like a bad fit for the Eastern Front. Okay? Now, I know this was supposed to be the first game in the series, and Pacific Tide was supposed to come second. But Pacific Tide actually came first, as far as printing and release went. But here's the thing. The system is very strategic. And I think it works well for Pacific Tide because, again, if you think back, or you can look back again, or get your own copy out if you happen to own it, you know, you look at the distances here in the map. Let me just unfold the map in half. Okay. The distances here are huge that we're talking about, you know, from each of these places. This is massive distances here. But this, by comparison, now granted, you know, I know Soviet Union, Russia, biggest country, well, timeless, Russian, Soviet Union was the biggest country in the world, blah, blah, blah. But it's too crowded. It's just, it doesn't feel right. There's not enough space, especially with the bot. You know, early on in Pacific Tide, if the bot was playing a lot of, you know, weak cards, or the cards came out, because with the bot, you draw 3 cards and you choose one based on the preferences that go with the solitaire aid card. If the bot made some boneheaded choices, or just, you know, bad luck, bad cards came up, or the wrong combo of cards came up, there was time to fix that because the distances are so huge. And quite frankly, let's be honest, the Japanese just does not have the resources that clearly the Germans did when they unleashed on, the Soviet Union. It is a different course situation too when you're talking about naval versus land combat. It just doesn't feel right for this, and it does work for Pacific Tide, but it doesn't work for this, in my opinion. This, to put it another way, this is kind of like the Red Dragon Rising system. Okay, the Red Dragon Rising system worked very well that Bruce Costello made for that game, and then you had Red Dragon Green Crescent, and then they tried to use it in World at War magazine, I forget which issue, for Norway 1940. And that didn't work because the Red Dragon Rising system is a strategic system that was basically, in my opinion, they were trying to graft it onto an operational system, because you're only talking about Norway. You're not even talking about like the Northern Theater or something like that. But then it worked again for Great Pacific War, which just came out, because Great Pacific War is a strategic game. The system matches the situation that it's trying to model. And here, I don't think it's a match. I really don't feel like it fits well with it. Like it does with Pacific Tide. Pacific Tide, it fits very nice. But again, especially with the bot, and again, I can't stress this enough, this is from solitaire perspective because that's basically the primary gamer I am. And for those of you out there that are thinking about buying this and looking at it, and you're primarily solitaire gamer, I gotta be honest with you and be straight up with you as far as what I think. Now again, as always, you can watch this, listen to what I have to say, and you have your own analysis and be like, you know what, Tim, I think you're missing it on this one. Maybe, but these are my thoughts, which I share, and then you can use as you see fit to help you make decisions and stuff. So that I think is a big thing. There really is no margin for error here with the Soviets, because if you play the wrong sequence of cards, like for example, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far in playing this game, the Soviet player really needs to play Leningrad reserves early. Not only get more troops on the board, but to have that no retreat clause, so to speak, in play. So if the Germans make that push for Leningrad at the beginning of the game, you can be like, bam, I can discard this, and you can't retreat my dupa out. Okay? The bot may not do that. And quite frankly, that's part of my frustration, because the bot has not had the Leningrad card come out early enough, because the bot is supposed to start with the bot starts with the letter D, the defensive one, and Leningrad Reserves is a B letter card. So in the beginning of the game, if any D card shows up with Leningrad Reserves, then the D card is played, not the B. Okay? And then, on top of that, if let's say that there isn't a D card, but there are 3 other cards and there's more than one B card, then you randomly pick one. So you still have that element there. And it's not working. And now again, a human player would look at the situation and be like, screw that, man, I need to get this on the table. Bam! But the bot is not doing that. And again, that is the perspective I'm looking at from here. Okay? I also feel like that, given the scope and magnitude of the Eastern Front, another thing that kind of doesn't make the system fit is the amount of attack options. There's only so many cards you have that give you an attack option each year. And even when you buy ones back, because basically, again, it's like Pacific Tide. Each year you get your New Year cards, like for 1942, and then you can buy any cards in the discard pile with your production points. But there's just not enough attack options, for either side. And on top of that, the Russians are such a bad disadvantage at the beginning of the war, because you only roll 1 die, now rounded up for any fractions, for every 6 strength points they have. So that means if you have 2 spaces where the Russians have 12 units stacked in that space, they're going to get to roll 2 dice. But the Germans get a die for every 2 strength points. So that means they're going to get at least 6. That's a 3-to-1 edge every time in 1941. And in 1942, it's 1 in 5 for the Russians. I'm all for East Front games where the potential for the Germans to collapse the Soviet Union is there. But honestly, this is ridiculous. I feel like that Chappelle show skit with the black bush when that guy is like, ridiculous, man. That's what I think about this. It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. I mean, you need to be able to time your attacks, as you choose and stuff. And again, you could say that a human player could do that, but even human player like me, I mean, I was playing the Germans actively. I still was running into trouble trying to coordinate things. Okay, so it just doesn't. The attack options there's not enough of them there. There just is not. The way the system is with the cards just doesn't allow for a lot of timely strikes, particularly Russian strikes for counterattacks, I guess is the best way to put it. Speaking of the Soviets, it does feel like the Soviets are very scripted in this game. Again, if I'm a human player, based on these 4 plays that I've done here, I would definitely be putting Leningrad reserves down PDQ. Okay? But even that, there's other things that are scripted here too. Like the Russian winter offensive. If the Russians play this because, you're desperate and you want to be able to attack 3 areas, then as it says here at the bottom of the card, I want to make sure I get this close enough. There you go. I mean, it basically says, the Soviet player must pass until the end of the year. And this is his strongest attack card. So if you're like, holy crap, man, they're at the gates of Moscow. I got to do something. Bam, I need 3 attacks. Well, if you're holding like 3 cards in your hand, you're screwed. You can't use them the rest of the year. Same thing with, let me find it because I don't think I bought it when I started this. Oh, you know what? I might have picked it up anyway because it's a 0 value card, I think. Hold on. Give me 1 second here, everybody. I gotta find the right card. Oh no, I did end up buying it just because, because with the system, the bot buys certain cards. That's the best way to put it. But like here, Rasputista is the same thing. You can't play this unless the Germans have 3 or less cards in their hand. Now, granted, in 1941, the Germans are not going to want to pass because, they pass. It's like, Soviets say, da, we pass too. Why not? Why go ahead and give them extra chances and stuff? Heck no, that's stupid. But again, it's limiting. It's scripted, and that's not the point of playing strategy games to me. The point is to explore different options, to have as much freedom within, of course, reality. You can't be like being like, yeah, you know what, man, we got we've got to use a reference to the Watchmen. We got Dr. Manhattan to come through and clean house on the road to Moscow. Well, no, that's just not realistic. But within reality, you need to have flexibility there. And I just don't feel like it's there. I especially for the Soviets. And I am convinced that looking at, the way the bot has played and thinking about stuff, because I've given a lot of thought to this. Some of you may be thinking, whoa, Tim, how can you review this already? Well, let me tell you. I have been so absorbed with this game, and between my feeling with this game has been like, if you ever build anything and put it together and you're like ready to turn it on and you flip the switch and nothing happens and you're like, uh-oh, what did we do wrong? So you start tearing it apart and look through and be like, that's how I feel with this. I mean, unless I've been spending time with my kids or my wife, I have spent almost every waking moment on this because I've been trying to wrap my head around it, wrestle with it, make it work, and yeah, it's not. So that's, that's why I managed to get 4 plays done in what? I started the first play Saturday night. What's today? Tuesday? So that's like 4 plays in 3 days. Yeah, that's how I've been able to do that, quite frankly. So, okay. The other thing that I think is bad is there's no automatic victory conditions for the end of each year. Most East Front games I've seen give you some kind of victory conditions for the end of each year. Basically to simulate what would be necessary, especially from the German perspective early, and then, from the Soviets at the end, will be enough to collapse, to hit that center of gravity and force the enemy to, give it up and throw in the towel. And they aren't here. The automatic victory conditions, which I'll get to here in a little bit, because they're actually under the ugly column. They're a little, oh boy, what's the word I want? They're a little Interesting. Let's just use that word for now. We use that as a placeholder. Interesting. So that to me doesn't seem right either. You know, it just doesn't. It's just the auto victory, the lack of auto victory conditions at the end of each year just seems a little strange. And the other thing is, and this, I'm just mentioning this because some people there's really bugs, and some people I've seen comments at times, even on Board Game Geek, about this being like a deal breaker. But there's no individual unit ID, so you know if you're looking to, you know, spearhead your assault with the 24th Panzer Corps, which of course is one of my personal favorite units from the Eastern Front, it's not going to happen. None of these units have any identification whatsoever other than their nationality. So I just thought I'd mention that because it is a big deal to some people. To me, I like it, and it makes the game more engaging, I will say that. But it's never been a deal breaker for me. So, okay. Now, let's get to the ugly. Okay, hold on. Just want to get loosened up here. All right, now, let me go ahead. Let me make sure the camera's far enough out. It is. Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm going to take some red dice here. And maybe I'll take some white dice. White dice will show up better. I am going to mark for you on the map the spaces that will allow either side to accomplish a victory at the end of any year. Okay? Now, keep in mind, you got to look at this from the German perspective early on in the war. All right? White's not showing up well. Hold on. Let me see if I have enough red dice to make it work. I don't know if I have enough big red dice to make it work. That's the problem here. I need 4 of them. So bear with me for a second here. Here we go. Alright, red should show up better. Here we go. Because, of course, nothing gets your attention like red, right? Okay, so, for the Germans, at the end of 41 or 42, in order to win the game automatically, they have to have Berlin, Leningrad, okay, check, check, Moscow, check, and again, 1941 even, they need Baku. What? Yeah. Okay. That, I mean, I understand, don't get me wrong. I understand the significance of Baku. I get it. But to be an auto victory condition in 41 and 42, I mean, they would, if Leningrad and Moscow were captured and taken over, would it really require also the capture of Baku to collapse the entire Soviet regime at that point? I just can't buy that. I can't. I can't. I can't buy it. It doesn't make sense to me. I have never seen another East Front game that's had automatic victory conditions in 41 or 42 that involve capturing, you know, Baku along with Leningrad and Moscow. I mean later on maybe, but nothing closer, nothing. I can't buy that. I just can't. I can't buy that the Soviet government, you can see where I'm at down here. I mean, I'll zoom in for you. I mean, you can see, my Germans are basically all the way to Baku right now. Wait, are they in Baku? Not yet. Worse yet, if you look at this carefully, look at this paltry amount of Russian forces here. You know, there's 6 guys here, there's 2 dudes here, and there's 2 dudes here. And that's what I have to try and disrupt all this. If it wasn't for the supply rule, which the supply rule in the game basically is if you're out of supply at the beginning of each card you play, you have to remove a unit from there and they can't attack stuff. If it wasn't for that, I don't know if the Soviets could hang on in this game. I really don't, because then you would look for, you know, the dangerous exposed flank. But, yeah, okay. I guess maybe enough about Baku. Let's talk about another thing that is ugly that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The bulk of Soviet reinforcements end up locating, let's use the red dice again, so let me take them off to reset, give you a chance to cleanse your palate, so to speak, visually. The bulk of them end up showing up either over here in Kazan or Kubyshev. Okay. Now there are certain cards like Moscow, Leningrad reserves. There's one for Ukraine, but that's only 4 strength points. 4. But the bulk of them end up here. Now in the game, infantry can only move one of these boxes, one, each time that you activate an area. So, you know, how are you supposed to get them to the front? Yeah, there's a rail card, but there's one. There's one. One. And 1 is indeed the loneliest number here. So it's like, how are you supposed to bring these guys to battle fast enough to deal with these Germans that are sweeping through? You know, how are you supposed to build a line? I mean, you can see my Russian line here. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's barely holding on and really not defending hardly any victory point cities that are left. There's got to be a better way to bring those guys to the front. I mean, you know, by the time the Germans were pushing for Moscow, you know, in November of 41, there was all kinds of Russian troops in their way, you know. I just don't get it. Nope. Yeah. Okay. Another thing is ugly. The bot. The bot, quite frankly, I think does not work. And part of the reason I think the bot does not work for this is the order of play of cards, especially for the Soviets in 1941, is critical. When I let the bot play the other side, because finally I was just like, okay, wait a minute, you know, let's see what happens here in 1941, because this is my 4th full play, and I've had a bunch of smaller plays of just the first year or two, 41, 42, just to test the bot and see what it would do. Because the first time it happened when, you know, the Leningrad reserves didn't come up in a timely manner and I captured Leningrad, I was like, well, maybe that's an anomaly. Let me check it out. Let me look. And it turns out, quite frankly, in my opinion, it was not. So when I did it the other way around, I was able to put together a more defensible line, but, you know, it still was difficult. You know, the cities don't give you any kind of inherent bonus defensively and such. You know, it's not like one of those things where, you know, a lot of other East Front games, if you're defending in a city, you don't necessarily have to retreat. You know, like I said about the retreat rule that I explained a while ago, you have to. So I was able to at least put together a better defensive line and kind of lessen the blow, but still, at the same time, it's just, the bot is not capable of playing the cards in the critical order that is necessary for the Soviet Union to really survive. The only thing that allows the Soviet Union to survive with the bot is the fact that you need Baku. And to me, that feels gamey, quite frankly. It was just kind of like, to me, it just feels like, well, you know what? You know, it just feels gamey. I'm just going to let it go at that and say that without it, like if you had another condition, you know, like even Stalingrad, I don't think the bot could survive. I really don't. So that card play, especially in 1941, so important. And even the way that cards are purchased by the bot is a bit risky and chancy. You know, they may not purchase the best stuff for 1942, which means, again, as a competent German player, you can exploit that and that's it. And again, as you guys know, I've never been one to shy away from, you know, having systems, solitaire systems where mistakes are made. Because, you know, as a former tournament chess player, I mean, that's what, you know, a contest is. You're looking to exploit the other person's, you know, weaknesses, their blunders, you know, and if they don't make an outright mistake or blunder and you take advantage of it, then you need to find their weakness and pound on that weakness, whatever that happens to be. But I mean, here it just seems too easy, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It doesn't work. It really doesn't. Another thing I think is ugly here is that if I was teaching this to a new player, especially a new individual who's into wargaming, I would not let them play the Soviets. Too tough, I think. The order of cards, how it's played, how they're played in response to what the Germans do is so critical to staying alive and staying afloat that one misstep, you could be screwed. And I think a newbie person could get discouraged by that. I just wouldn't do that. If I was playing with a new player or somebody just new to wargaming, or somebody that even has a little bit of experience, like as a Memoir 44 player and stuff like that. Not to disparage Memoir 44, but I mean, this is a step up from it. I mean, we have, let's be honest. I would have them always play the Germans because it is so much easier to play the Germans. It's just really hard. I think the curve is too steep. And this is supposed to be an easy, light, strategic game. And I don't see that with this card play with the Soviets. I don't. Most people don't like playing the Soviets in East Front games to begin with because it does feel like the Soviets are being a punching bag at the beginning of the war, which I mean they were. I mean the German superiority and especially combined arms approach was just killing the Soviets at the beginning of the war. I mean it was that aspect, I believe, more than anything else, that really allowed the Germans their breathtaking successes. The Russians were just not. They were not ready for that. The whole Stalinist purges and the whole commissars and things like that. That elimination of flexible thinking. I mean, just doomed them when the Germans hit them. I mean, it was like an ant getting hit with a sledgehammer. Now, of course, the Russians rallied from that. They, fixed that and got back to their deep operations concept, which Tukhachevsky had enumerated, back in the 30s. But that was some costly, bloody lessons, and the Germans were at the height of their ability, their perfection of doing that. And it was overwhelming. It's the thing that really, in my opinion, it's the thing that really allowed the Germans to be as successful as they were. They just weren't quite, I don't think they grasped the scope of what they were getting into, It's kind of like when somebody asks you to move, and you're like, yeah, okay, I hope you move, and then you show up and you're like, oh, dude, it's like, oh man, I did not realize what I was about to get into here. The other thing that to me is ugly is, since Leningrad and Moscow are achievable in 41, early 42, the loss of them doesn't really seem to have an impact on the Soviets. Now, granted, it is a victory point space, which means the production level of the Soviet Union goes down. That's true. But the Soviets still, say for argument's sake, Leningrad is captured in 1941. Okay, like I did this last game. Every turn, you get your year card. So I get all the Soviet cards for 1942, no matter what. No matter what happens, I get those cards. And then I can use my build points to buy cards from 1941. So I'm always going to get those 1942 cards. Now, granted, there is the impact that, hey, I can't maybe buy some of the cards I want from 1941. But you're always going to have cards. You're always going to have quite a few cards. And, of course, as the war goes on, the Soviets will have more and more new cards introduced while the Germans will not. But, so there's no consequence for that? I mean, yeah, okay, you lose the build point. Okay, fine. And that could be the difference between buying a 2 and a 3 card. I get that. But if you lose both, you still get all those cards? I don't know. That seems a little wonky to me, for lack of a better way to put it. Let me look at my list here for a second. Hang on. Just want to double check and make sure I didn't miss anything. But I don't think so. No. So as you can see, there's a lot of bad and a lot of ugly here, because this game just, from a solitaire perspective, now again, from a 2-player perspective, it may end up being very different. I'm not going to speak to that, but what I'm speaking to is what I know, and what I know is from a solitaire player's perspective, this just, it doesn't work, in my opinion. It's is it broken? No, I would not go so far as to say that the game is broken. I think that's too harsh. Because, I mean, Pacific Tide is the same basic system and it works okay. But I will say that I think the bot here, despite the extra things that are added on, you know, like, well, even, okay, here's another thing. Okay, look here. There's priorities, right? Okay, but look at 1942. Now, at the beginning of 1942, this last play, I rolled a B, a balanced approach. Okay, so Leningrad was already taken. Moscow was under serious threat. So what are the annual priorities here for the Soviets? Entrench Leningrad and Stalingrad. Wait, hold on. So, wait, I mean, there's a back side of the card here that's triggers, but, you know, okay, so one card, and if Moscow and Leningrad are both fallen, now what? Because I really think the Germans can capture both of them in 1941 if they completely ignore the South. If they're like, look, dude, you know what? Psst, screw this. I know I'm not going to be able to get to Baku anytime soon. Again, this seems gamey to me, but it's like, you know what? Screw that. I'm going to put all my effort at Leningrad and Moscow. I'll put enough troops to keep my flanks covered and, you know, slow down the Soviets as much as possible because, of course, remember, the Soviets don't get too many dice in 41 and 42. Comparatively speaking. That's another thing too. That seems a little odd. The number of dice. So like I told you, you get to divide Axis. If the Germans, Germans every 2 combat units, you get a die. Now, of course, if the Allies, Romania, Hungary, Bulgaria, Finland, are on their own, then, okay, that's not so good. But if there's even just one German infantry unit involved, or armored unit involved, you get that 1 for 2 bonus. So, okay. So that means I could have like 8 Romanian infantry, for argument's sake, and 1 German, and I still get to divide by 2 instead of by 4. Really? Seriously? No. That's just one German unit is going to have that much impact on a bunch of Romanian forces that they're going to be able to fight like that. Really? And then, of course, if I'm smart and use a German infantry unit, which means that when you roll a 6, that could be a critical hit, which means the other side has to lose armor or air. But if I'm smart and use a German infantry unit with, say, 8 Romanians, then every time we take damage, I can just lose Romanians. Sorry, no offense to people in Romania, but I mean, that's what I can do. You know, I mean, that's kind of where the concept of cannon fodder comes from, right? And I can just hold on to my 1 German strength point and be like, oh yeah, baby, dividing by 2 every time, like clockwork. No, I'm sorry. That's no. Okay. So, lots to take a look at, to think about. It's just, I know this is one of my longer review videos, but there's just so much here that is, to me, so problematic that this might be one of my biggest disappointments I've had in a while, quite frankly. And I was so looking forward to this, and it's just the bottom line is the system. Well, the bottom line is, if I was going to put the bottom line in 3 points, it would be this: the system is not capable of reflecting the circumstances on the Eastern Front in World War II. I don't think it's capable of doing that, 1. 2, the bot doesn't work because the card play is so critical, especially at the beginning of the game with the Soviets. It just does not work. And like I said, this is my fourth full play, and I've done, oh, I don't know. Let me think about this for a minute, roughly. I probably have done, because this does play quick. That's the good part. I probably have done about 4 or 5 plays in addition of just doing like the first 2 years, 41 and 42, to see the bot's capabilities. As soon as I sort of noticed that there's something, there's something to be worried about here. So yeah, it just doesn't work. The bot is not up to the rigors of what's demanded here on the Eastern Front. Not in the way that it is in the Pacific Theater. And again, I think that's because of the distances involved. And I also think it because of the relation of strength. You know, the Japanese, even at their strongest point, were nowhere near as strong as the Germans. They're just, you know, but I mean, there's a reason. You know, the Allies were like Germany first. There's a reason for that. And again, the other thing I would say is just that the card play early on for the Soviets is so critical that there's almost no margin for error. There really isn't. You know, some people talk about in East Front games about a pro-German bias. Yeah. I honestly think that there is one here. Because it's just, I found it too easy, especially against the bot, to get much farther and capture objectives that the Germans never got to in 1941, and with nowhere near as tenuous a position. I mean, here in Leningrad, I've got, 4 strength points with an air unit. In Moscow, I still have 4 with an air unit. I've got this huge stack of units here, ready to continue to attack towards Gorky and Kazan. It's just, the Russians are not able to inflict enough damage. They're not, and they should, as what happened historically eventually, they should be able to bleed them white. They should be able to trade 5 men for 1. So, this, to me, this just, it doesn't work. There's no other way to put it. So, okay, that all being said, the next time I see you, probably I'm going to go back from this disaster to Great Pacific War, which I think has a lot of potential. I played it once before this showed up. I really enjoyed the first play a lot. I haven't explored, there's 2 scenarios for the 30s and 20s. I haven't touched the 20s yet, but just even exploring the 30s, it seems like there is a lot of potential in that game, and it was a lot of fun to play, I'll say that. So, that's probably where I'll see you all from next time around. So, this is Tim Korchnoi, a very disappointed Tim Korchnoi from Bare Bones Wargaming, saying, I will see you next time from happier gaming facilities. And this game, I was looking forward to this so much, I even sleeved the cards. I'm sad. I guess that's how I'll close this. I'm just disappointed and sad. And again, if some of you have counterpoints and stuff, I'm more than happy to see them in the comments and discuss things. I'm more than happy to talk about things. If you think I'm misreading something or, missing something, that's fine. That's cool. That's totally awesome. Feel free. That's part of all this. But from everything I've ever studied, and, I've read books on the Eastern Front from, Carroll to Glance to Luther to Stale, I just don't see where this represents the Eastern Front very well. So, alright. So again, next time I'll see you from a happier place, gaming-wise. I'll go out to the Pacific Theater to bind my wounds. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.